Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So, for those of you who watched my last videos, you will have seen I bought a rusty 22-year-old BMW 325, drove it to the Czech Republic and went endurance racing in it. What I also did was when I first bought the car, I took out a black box insurance policy just to see how evil these things are and if I could get it cancelled without breaking the law. For those of you who do not know what a black box insurance policy is, basically some UK car insurance companies offer this policy where they fit a telematics box to your car and monitor where, when and how you drive. The theory is that if you drive terribly, then they will increase your insurance premiums or cancel your policy, and if you drive to a higher standard, obeying the rules of the road without braking or accelerating excessively, then your premiums decrease. I did do a little research into some testimonials of drivers who had experiences with these policies, and they were overall pretty mixed. A lot of younger people were complaining that someone had pulled out in front of them or they'd hit a pothole and they get a negative score on their insurance, so it looks like they're bad drivers for things that are out with their own control. Some companies also impose a soft curfew, so if someone was driving after something like 11 PM, you would automatically get a negative score because most accidents happen between certain times. Throughout my research, I found that by far the worst company seemed to be this one that was called Marmalade, who, according to the reviews, fine drivers for getting a bad score on a single journey of £125 upwards. I thought this had to be a joke or fake reviews or something, but it's confirmed on their website that they do actually do this. It's a shame, but I have to say it is just a terrible time to be a new driver in the UK. I did set myself some rules for this experiment, because if you just take out a policy and blast down the M6 at 140 miles an hour, then I'm not really providing any real results. So my criteria were as follows. 1. Drive normally like any person would, so no speeding, driving like I stole it or going sideways. 2. No tampering with the box. Some people have had their policy cancelled because of this, so I wasn't taking any chances. And 3. No breaking any traffic laws. The goal was to see what you can actually do with one of these policies without doing anything legally wrong before the company starts screaming at you. And just to note, before going any further, because I know someone in the comments is going to whinge about this, I'm fully aware that if your insurance is cancelled, it is difficult to get a policy in the future. But as an immigrant to the Czech Republic who won't be living in the UK for the foreseeable future, I don't care. I won't be getting another policy for a long time, so I can afford to deliberately take this risk. So first off, I ran some insurance quotes, and they were all around £200 per year more expensive than just normal insurance, since I'm not a young driver anymore. But regardless, there were 3 options available to me: Admiral Little Box, Bell and Hastings Direct U-Drive. I of course ended up going with the cheapest one, which was Admiral. Luckily, this company was not requiring for somebody to actually come out and fit the box themselves. You were just sent a little box that sticks to your windscreen, so it kept everything nice and easy. Plus, they had the cheapest cancellation fees, since I was only planning on having this policy for 2 months maximum. There were 4 categories that you were scored on with this policy: speed, acceleration, braking and phone distraction. The biggest peeve for me was the phone distraction, since Admiral requires you to have this power-hungry app running constantly on your phone monitoring its use. Even if a passenger is using it, you'll get marked down for it. So the first journey was from around Glasgow to the ferry terminal in Newcastle. This was just a normal mixture of A roads and the occasional dual lane 70 miles per hour road. There were a few instances of speeding which I would believe did happen on the M8, because there are a few stretches that are 50 zones but traffic is still typically moving at a higher speed. The only noticeable issue was there was an excessive acceleration mark just outside of Newcastle, which was definitely a mistake of the box, since the car had a nasty noise coming from the rear end under hard acceleration and gear changes, so I was actively avoiding hard acceleration. The following day it was time to see how it behaved on the autobahn. I was cruising around 90 miles per hour and only passed 100 miles per hour a couple of times because I didn't really trust the car. Surprisingly, it didn't really care about speeds on the autobahn, so there weren't any problems here. About a week after getting back in Prague, a mate had a test drive of the car and and it was in a rather spirited fashion, and it definitely showed. There were quite a few acceleration warnings, but that was nothing surprising. What was surprising was I got my first score out of 100 4 days later, and it was a spectacular 40 out of 100. But it was because of the phone distractions score. The phone had only been used while driving for Google Maps, so it seemed really unfair. I would completely understand a low score because of the aggressive driving test, but the phone distraction, that was just bullshit, man. About 1 month later, it was put to the ultimate test. The car was driven about an hour north of Prague to a racetrack, and the app cried about speed, braking and phone distractions. A friend was driving the BMW, following me in my 20-year-old 1.4 diesel Skoda Fabia, and I was sticking to the speed limit, which isn't hard in something this slow. There were no crazy brakes, no crazy acceleration, and the phone was in a cradle the entire journey in another car. The following day, the car was raced in a 4-hour endurance race. Although it was probably on a track a combined 5 hours because there was a test session and qualifying as well. The Admiral little box only recorded 50 minutes of the race and must have detected we were on a racetrack because they deemed those 50 minutes of driving to be flawless. So what have we learned from this, and what are our final conclusions? Well, firstly, the accelerometer in the black box seems to be utterly useless and registers a lot of fake excessive acceleration and braking. This did seem to get worse in Czech, and I have a suspicion that may be because of the lower quality roads shaking the car more than the roads in the UK, Netherlands and Germany. You can drive your car as fast as you'd like on the autobahns without consequences, well, at least without issues with the insurance company, and you can take your cars to track days without issues. I'm actually really surprised that nothing happened with the app when on a racetrack in the Czech Republic. If Admiral know that Most Autodrome is a racetrack, then they must have every track in the UK marked out as well. Would I recommend a black box? From a purely financial point of view, if you were insuring a track car that was literally only used to drive to and from the racetrack or something of a similar nature, being driven for very few miles per year, sure, go for it. Chances are you wouldn't be driving enough to lower your score enough to get the policy cancelled. I drove around 1,500 miles and it wasn't cancelled, and there were a few miles driven a tad too enthusiastically. But if this was your only form of transportation, or you were actually driving higher miles each year,
No! God!
no. These black boxes seem to be far too unreliable, and the more journeys you drive, the more chance you have that they will rack up false mistakes. Also, I had read of black box users getting contacted by their insurance company about not having their car parked at their registered address overnight. The concept of an insurance company tracking me sounds like a dystopian nightmare. But my car was parked in a warehouse in Prague for 3 weeks and was never even driven in the city the car was registered in with the black box. Admiral doesn't seem to care where your car is, so at least for the first 2 months there aren't any issues with them tracking your location. If you are a teenager trying to get insurance, good luck, and I hope this information has given you some idea about what you're able to do if a black box is your only option financially. I was lucky enough to start driving before this business practice became commonplace, so good luck to all of you out there. And finally, an update on the cheap BMW. I was trying to break it for parts, but it turns out the market in the Czech Republic is pretty small, since it's just a small country, and I was only able to sell the doors, front seats and a couple of small parts before giving up and trying to sell the rest of the car as a whole. I did find a buyer, and when they came to collect the car, they didn't show up with a trailer, but instead a couple of doors and haggard driver's seat, and just drove it home. It was pretty heroic. So that's the BMW gone, and we've already bought a new longer term project car, which will be revealed in the next video. So that's it for this video. So until the next, ciao ciao for now.